Welcome to Straight Talk with me, Peter Martin. I'm delighted to say this new series starts with a friend of mine as my first guest, former top referee Hugh Dallas. Hugh, of course, officiated at the top of the game domestically, Europe and in the world stage over a 15-year period, 10 years as a FIFA referee, and of course here domestically in Scotland, we all know him. Hugh, first of all, welcome to the programme, welcome to the house to talk football. Do you miss it?
I don't miss being on the field because there just comes a time the bones longer to recover. It's time to stop. When I was still refereeing at international level, I found that approaching the sort of 45 age limit, that I was struggling to do a European game and then a domestic game, particularly if it was a big domestic game. 3 days later, it was taking me longer to recover. I didn't feel that at 43, 42, but I felt it at 45. So I thought it was maybe just time to stop.
Yeah. Was that more to do with the physicality or the concentration level that it required?
No, I think it was the physicality because you actually need to train harder when you get older, and you're not getting any fitter because you're not getting any younger. The metabolism is changing in your body. I could feel a wee kilo here and a wee kilo there, even although I was training. But I just felt I wanted to go out at the top. We sometimes see players, I've spoke to top players that'll tell you to stay on the pitch as long as you can, and I accept that, but I think you have to do it at the top level rather than go down the leagues. So I just wanted to stop, and I thought it was the right time.
Me growing up, and especially as a young journalist, I think many of us regarded you as the top referee in our era of football, certainly in Scotland, when we watched you develop to Europe and, of course, the world occasions that you were involved in. Do you think you would have loved to have had VAR alongside you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm quite sure the fans would have loved me to have VAR also. No, because you make a mistake. In my day, you made a mistake, and fans still talk about it maybe for 20 years. Now, I'm walking out the stadium, with a referee, and people are coming up and congratulating him for making an error because he's corrected it, through VAR going to the monitor. So referees have got a great out now, but referees should still referee naturally. Because I was at a game, I was actually in Graz at this week, Graz and PSV Eindhoven, where the referee had to go to the monitor twice, and he was furious, at full time. But I told him, I said, look, I've looked at both incidents and you could not have seen them on the pitch. Now, in my day, that would have been two really blatant errors, missed penalty kick and an offside goal. But now they can correct these things, so it's a positive way ahead for sure.
And when you look back, and I can't think of one, but I'm sure you'll be able to stick. Is there one in your mind that you thought, if I had VAR, I could have rectified that?
You've not got enough time. Not enough time.
Yeah.
I think probably the worst one that always sticks out in my mind was the day I put John O'Neill at St Johnstone off St Johnstone Celtic, and I thought John had aimed a kick at somebody. He'd actually tried to kick the grass off the bottom of his boot, and my assistant referee didn't even bail me out that day. He let me go with it. And it was a horrendous. Every time I see John O'Neill, I've got to buy him a beer. So VAR would have picked that up and changed it, and of course the player is then suspended, for the next day and for the next game. I remember the Dundee United Rangers on the last league game of the season, and I gave a red card for George Alberts, when he sort of petulantly kicked, and I thought the kick was more because the player that received the kick really exaggerated it. So of course I gave him the red card for violent conduct. Of course it ruled him out the cup final, the following week or 2 weeks later. And I really felt uncomfortable because when I saw it, I thought, oh no, but there was no appeal in that, and he served his ban. So to miss a cup final because of a referee decision, it didn't sit comfortably with me at all.
Yeah, and am I right in thinking you're a fan of, they want the referees to relay to the crowd now, I've had a look at it, this is why I've come to this decision. Are you a fan of that, communication?
I think now the door's open with VAR. It's very difficult to close it. So this is now the next thing that they now want. They talk about transparency. Referees they've got nothing to hide. Is it a benefit for? I mean, it goes up on the board. VAR review, possible penalty. If the referee does the signal and points to the penalty spot, then they know it's a penalty. The problem you have internationally is that you'll have maybe French referees who maybe don't speak fluent English or fluent Spanish, depending what stadium they're in, and they'll try to be really in English, obviously, and a lot of people wouldn't understand.
We've seen that at the Women's World Cup already.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. So is it the way ahead? No, it's not rugby. You know, it's not the same as rugby football, and I don't really see the necessity, but I think the pressure will come, particularly from the TV companies, that they want to try and add something else in. So I can understand it, but I don't really see it being a great benefit, to be honest. Yeah.
Do you think is there an acceleration or a feeling within Scotland that it's got to happen quickly?
I think I don't think in Scotland there is. I think obviously they'll look at it. I think if IFAB open up the door to say you can do it, then of course the TV companies will be knocking on the door and saying, right, we want to hear what's going on. But at the moment, Scotland are one of the few countries where the actual TV can hear what the VAR is saying. So that doesn't happen in UEFA competition, for instance. It's totally blocked out. But in Scotland, they can hear that.
Yeah. As the downside, certainly for me, the only downside that I can see, as well as everybody appreciating that VAR is for trying to get the percentage of things higher, sure, getting it right, is the downside the speed of the use of it?
Yeah, I mean, the game I attended this week, it took just under 3 minutes for an offside decision, for the goal to be disallowed. Now, we then went and analysed that afterwards when we were back in our hotel, and I could understand why it took as long, because first of all, they need to check it was regarding the line of vision on the goalkeeper. There was a player quite close to a defender. Then they decided possibly is offside, or is it not offside? But then they had to go back and check the build-up, which they call the APP. They need to go back and find out, was there any foul play in the lead-up to this goal being scored?
Is this the different phases?
This is the different phases, yeah. So they take it back to say, right, the VAR will start that attacking phase by a button, like a bookmark. So he'll hit a button and say, attacking phase, right? And then it will continue. Once that stops, he'll hit the other button to kill it, and he'll restart it again. So they need to go back and check, because you can imagine if a penalty was awarded, but there's been a foul committed maybe 12 seconds before and it's not been checked, then it's a mess. Yeah. So it does take time, but I think we're 2 weeks into the season in Scotland. I think it's been a very positive start with VAR. There have been some VAR incidents and they've been checked quite quickly. So the more they use it, the more they'll get used to it. Yeah,
I'm reading out, I put together a list of names: Willie Young, Brian McGinley, Craig Thompson, Crawford Allen, Kenny Clark, Stuart Dougal, David Syme, Mike McCurry, Charlie Richmond, Dougie Hope, Andrew Waddle, Bob Valentine. Now there's a cast. Some people will look at that list and say you might have missed a few out, but by the way, I didn't think he was a great referee. I can live with that whole thing, but the majority of those referees reach the heady heights of FIFA status. Why are we not producing in Scotland nowadays?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we've definitely fallen off. We've fallen off the cliff, internationally at the moment. There's no question of that. I think they've maybe lacked international coaching referees. I was very lucky when I was coming through internationally. Myself, Kenny Clark, and I were vying for that position at that time. But the support that we got from the SFA was incredible. We were coming back from matches, we were being debriefed by coaches back in Scotland. I was going away in the early days with Brian McGinley as an assistant referee, as a linesman in those days, with Bob Valentine. Yeah. So you were watching how these guys were operating.
And when I was a kid, Brian McGinley was the best referee you could ever have witnessed.
McGinley for sure was, undoubtedly. if Brian had just worked on his, on his fitness,
Yeah.
it would have been even better. I remember we were appointed to the semi-final of the European Cup, and Brian went to do a fitness test and failed it. And we knew we would be taken off the game.
Yeah.
We knew it, he wouldn't get the game if he wasn't fit. And he phoned me, he says, "Don't worry, he said, we've got a final." And that was Brian. Brian knew how to operate, in Europe, and he did get his final. I think it was under 21 final or something. But he was a great referee. Away, he was so well respected, and it's just unfortunate now that I offered at the time to coach Colum and Thompson when they were starting off in UEFA. I had left the SFA at the time. But I said at the time, it was the late John Fleming, and I said to John, I'll debrief them when they come back, and we'll work on them, and we'll try and I was on the UEFA referee committee also, and I found out it wasn't really backed, it wasn't supported by the SFA, that the referees were paying for hotel rooms and things like that to video, and I thought, no, it needs to have the backing of the federation, because if your referees are doing well in Europe, then it's actually projecting the National Association and also the league that they're refereeing in, because people keep talking about this 2-team league that we have, but we've got a good league. I think we've got a great league. We've got a lot of good competition. We know that one of the top two are always going to win it because that's budget driven, but I just feel that if the referees were represented at a high level in Europe, it would also project the image of your football. Yeah,
we're going to talk about obviously your career, but just picking up on that point, do you believe that your premature departure from the SFA in a way hindered the chance to help referees? I've heard that suggested before. I think it might have been Craig Thompson who suggested that Hugh Dallas's experience was invaluable for people, and that was a void.
Yeah, I don't think any doubt about that, and I don't mean that to sound blasé, but when you've got somebody sitting at the top table, and also I gained through going to World Cups and Olympic Games and Euros and things, you take that experience, you want to give that to the next generation. I never get that opportunity, and it was unfortunate maybe the referees sort of lost out on that, but because I gained that from former referees, from the McGinleys and the Valentines, but that's never been passed on now, so they probably did lose out a bit, because we've got some good referees and they should be refereeing at the top in European competition.
In your mind, who's close to that?
I think we're maybe just going through a little void at the moment, to be honest. I think we need to look really down the ladder a bit to try and find the sort of next generation. The young boy Dickinson that's just came onto the FIFA list, I think he's very promising. I can see a European style refereeing. They're also about a style of refereeing that you can go abroad. When you go abroad into competition, it's all about body language and how you sell decisions, where here it's all verbal and you're talking, you're building up communication, you're building up relationships with players.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that abroad because you'll probably never see them again unless you go to the very top.
Yeah.
So I think David Dickinson is probably one in the long term for the future, for sure.
Okay, there's lots more that I'd love to get your opinion on, but let's take you back the way now. Hugh Dallas is a young referee. What was the best bit of advice as you were starting out all those years ago? I think mid to late 80s. Was there somebody who handed a bit of advice to you then that it served you well and helped you progress?
Two people who were hugely influential in my career were George Cumming, who was the head of refereeing at that time, and Donald McVicker, who was a top referee in Scotland also. And I used to go with Donald when I didn't have a game and watch Donald, and he was a wise old owl. He always told me, he says, if you make one mistake at one end of the pitch, don't go to the other end and try and balance it up, because you've doubled your mistakes in the game. And I always thought that was clever. So when you've got people like that, you've got mentors like that, and you're listening to them with a wealth of experience, those were really the two guys. And then George Cumming would then start and appoint you, to go abroad. As I say, Kenny Clark and I often went to Brian McGinley as his assistant referees. So these were the guys that you were learning from, at that stage. But certainly George Cumming, who took refereeing from an amateur level to a professional level, because he was the first guy to to set up the sort of professional setup at the Old Park Gardens, and he was followed by Donald McVicker, who I then went on to work as his assistant. So these two guys were definitely influential for sure.
Yeah, and when you were younger, they always say, you know, referees now, the banter's gone. Did you have that ability to chat to people? You mentioned relationships there, which some people will be aghast at, but nevertheless, you're in Scotland, you're there every week refereeing top games. When you know, when you were younger, were you able to have that banter while still retaining what you thought was that command of what was happening around you?
I think when you're really young and you're just starting off and you're really nervous and you're aware of what's going on, because you're a lot of experienced pros around about you, and you're just a, you know, an amateur in comparison to these guys. So you need to edge your way in, and sometimes when you look back, you think maybe the way I spoke to a player, or maybe I was quite dismissive of a player, or but I always tried to respect players, you know. But sometimes you did lose, you know, that sense of respect, and you did.
Yeah.
And it was after you were maybe home at night, you were sitting on a glass of wine, you thought, I should never have spoke to him like that, you know. Although he spoke to me, but you need to rise above that, because you're the referee. You need to try and show that you're, you know, the respect. But I think we've got that now. You'll always have young. I won't mention names, but there are one or two young referees that I watch at the moment really require coaching, you know, because of the sort of people skills, you know, where they dismiss players, and, you know, that's a thing. I remember Davy Provan telling me once that Bob Valentine, you know, dismissed him by calling him Sonny, and it's amazing when you think what Davy Provan achieved in the game.
Yeah.
But that sticks in his mind. That always taught me a lesson to say, right, I need to remember that. But I'm sure there'll be some former pros who are maybe sitting in this seat another day. I've probably told a story or two about me.
Well, I was going to ask you that because, if anything, I didn't quite view you as someone who was officiating with an iron rod. I just felt as if you had the command of people who were not going to, you know, try and pull the wool over your eyes. You know, that was I got that sense that you were in control of it, and anybody who wanted to contest something, you know, some people would say, oh, wait a minute, he was arrogant when he was roaming about the park, you know, and it's all to do with perception.
Yeah, I can accept that. I think you need a bit of arrogance, you know, when you're a referee. I think you need, sometimes arrogance can be mistaken for confidence. And if you're going into an Old Firm game, you know, the first thing you need is confidence. That's for sure. If you go out there and don't believe in yourself, so a wee bit of arrogance is fine if it's channeled, you know, in the correct manner. But I'm definitely not an arrogant person.
Yeah.
But sometimes refereeing, you go into the stage of a bid, it's like show business. You know, all of a sudden you need to change your personality. I know some referees who have got very, very quiet personalities off the pitch, but they're tigers when they go on the pitch.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's the stage, you know, that they're on. So yeah, a wee bit of arrogance doesn't go amiss as long as it's channeled in the correct way.
Yeah. Do you remember your first Old Firm game?
Oh yeah, I remember it well. 3-3. At Ibrox. It was an incredible. In fact, I still, Richard Goff and Paul McStay were the captains that day, and you never go into refereeing thinking you would ever referee an Old Firm game.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, and I think I was working at STV at the time. That wasn't the one where there was a goal.
Jerry.
Yeah. Did we miss a goal? Get chopped off.
I honestly can't remember if that was.
Was that the one when Gorham made the wonder save out with Hooijdonk at Ibrox?
I think it could have been.
Yeah.
But I remember just to go back to the goal that wasn't a goal. It was chalk. One of the goals was disallowed for offside.
Yeah.
And I think Jerry McNee. Jerry McNee was commentating. Of course, he went down to look at the replay and he was commentating. But meantime, the flag had gone up. I had taken the offside decision, and away we went. And I remember at half time, I spoke to my wife at half time. She says, "What happened with the goal?" I says, "What goal?" I said, "It was offside." She went, "According to STV, it wasn't for 7 minutes. You know, it continued up, and all of a sudden, the score just changed." Oh, by the way, that goal, you can imagine an Old Firm fan watching that. But the first Old Firm game was very, very special. And Hooijdonk had been cautioned that day for a challenge or something. And when he scored one of the equalising goals, he launched himself into the Celtic end, which is a yellow card. And I was aware it was a yellow card. And I thought, no. If there a supervisor going to criticise me, then too bad. There's no way I'm going to caution a player for celebrating a goal here, you know. So,
in a sense, somebody will be jumping at the telly right now, going, "Well, wait a minute, you should have stuck to the letter of the law."
Absolutely.
But was there more of a kind of a leeway towards let the referee show a bit of common sense?
Law 18, you know, I mean, it's an Old Firm game. If it had been maybe two smaller clubs and it was maybe his first yellow card. So anyway, at the end of the game, I always remember the General Secretary of Rangers coming in after the game. I think it was Campbell Ogilvie, and he came in and he says, "Thanks very much for no giving a second yellow card to the Celtic player." And I looked at him, I thought, what? He went, "There'd been a riot in here." He says, "Real common sense was, you know, prevailed." I went, "All right, okay, fine, thanks." And when he closed the door, I went, hope the SFA think the same thing, you know, when they came in, because I was unsure.
You mentioned John Fleming, though. John was such a nice guy who could look at things in the context. He wasn't what I call one of these irrational knee-jerk guys. You know, you could pick the phone up to him and chat to him. I always had a great relationship with him.
John had the most magnificent, sarcastic sense of humour.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, John travelled all over. John was my assistant referee when I did the opening game in the Amsterdam Arena, Netherlands against Brazil, and John just made you laugh. You know, he was just a funny guy. So he was always a comfortable guy to travel abroad with, because you knew he would entertain you. And then when it got down to the serious business, you know, he did his job as a FIFA assistant referee. So there's always humour, you know, where there's pressure. You know, sometimes you need to break that.
And you mentioned there that was your first one. You also, and it's amazing how inextricably linked you are on one end of the field, I'm on the other end as a broadcaster. The game that I remember in the press area for being the scariest game I've ever been at, you know, was the game where Rangers clinched the title at Ibrox. I've never been so scared because I just felt as if because we were witness to the crowd, it was really, really tense. It was something that was at stake, and Rangers were in Celtic's backyard, and the crowd, it was poison. Yeah,
you know, during the game, you shut all the noise out. I can remember it was a bank holiday weekend, and I'd been to a sport in Hamilton, and I'd been for a sauna and been for a bit of breakfast because it was an evening kick-off, and we were coming back home and I could see everybody sitting in grass bankings and drinking, and you know, and I had a wee thing in the back of my mind saying, this is dynamite probably.
Yeah.
Because although it wasn't the day that Rangers, I think it was the day that Rangers could win the league, but the point difference was quite a bit, I think. It meant that Celtic couldn't catch them any longer.
Yeah.
I treated it like a normal game. You know, you still go into it, you're aware of the players and who you want to speak to. You talk to the captains, get the captains to talk to the troublemakers, and the way you used to toss a coin sometimes, and you would maybe talk to a Peter Grant and say, "Peter, I need your help today. I can't get through this." Ian Ferguson at Rangers, these guys, and you try to buy into, you know, get them to help you with the players.
Yeah.
And that day I didn't really feel anything in the game. Of course, then you had the coin incident. You got to half time. I think the game finished 3-0, and it wasn't until you got home that then you started to get a sense of watching the news and watching maybe some fighting that was going on in the streets through the news channels.
Yeah.
But
were you not scared when you get hit with the coin?
I've never been hit with a coin like that before.
Yeah.
It was quite a strange, a sort of dull, you know, feeling. But the only thing in my mind was to get that game restarted.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing that was in my mind. You know, a lot of countries, the game would have been stopped, finished, abandoned.
Yeah.
That never entered my mind for sure, because there's security issues with that you've got to get 60,000 people out onto the streets, you know, with the police known gates been opened, and so that never entered, you know, our mind. That, but we got to half time, the Celtic doc stitched up the cut, and you know, I remember him coming in with the smelling salts, you know, and the fourth official was John Robotham, and John grabbed the smelling salts, and I said, John, they're for me.
Yeah.
You know, he was a bit worried that he maybe need to take over, but again, we get the Celtic general manager came in that day, McDonald.
Alan
McDonald, see if everything was okay out for the second half. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think from the SFA report I always remember about that game was the fact that you were not at the forefront of any criticism. It was the players and the way they conducted themselves. I think it was just the whole occasion, you know, and of course your opponent is always going to rub salt into the wound, you know, when you're winning in your backdoor stadium. We knew that would happen, so it was. You were always thinking to the end of the game, you want to get these players off here as quick as you can. You don't want, you know, huddles going on with the opposing team and, you know, stitching up the, you know, the away the home fans. Were you aware of your handing out red cards that you thought this was going mental? Yeah, I think the tackle right at the last red card with reset. Yeah, you could see it was just I've had enough. Yeah, you know, just wiped it. You know, Wallace. I think it was Rod Wallace that day. So you knew at that stage, and I was talking to Paul Lambert. Paul was a super guy. Is a super guy, but on the pitch, you know, you could always speak to him, and you knew it wasn't. You just knew it wasn't. There was no effect because the players were so pumped up. So yeah, probably haven't refereed much more tougher matches, you know, than that. And you get to the stage where you just want to manoeuvre your way through to the end. If it's a red card and you think you can maybe get away with a yellow, you would go down the way rather than, you know, up the way. But when players commit second yellow card offences, you really want to say, well, I'm sorry, mate, you know, you can't continue in this game. Yeah, strangely enough, you know, you're part of that game, which has a telling effect on society and on future Old Firm title deciders. It's like going back to the 1981 had an impact from the government putting in legislation with regards to, you know, the drinking alcohol, and those two games between those two massive clubs have changed the sport in effect. Do you think there's a need? I can't say we've moved forward. My God, some people would say we've moved back, you know, in society. But is there a need to say, listen, there are rules in place now. There's more security. There's more understanding of how to handle these games. We should, as a country, allow the potential for an Old Firm title decider. Yeah, I can understand why they avoid it. I can understand the mentality of if we can avoid it, avoid it. I think that's a sensible approach. I think any country would be like that. I was in Turkey last season, and the last match of the season was Galatasaray Fenerbahce, and the way the league was going, it was looking as if it could be. And then they moved it to the second last. So they tried to avoid it. So they tried to avoid it, yeah. Yeah. So sometimes I think we are insular in our thinking because we don't see the picture, but there are other countries who. What they did was they moved the whole league programme. Yeah. You know, instead of match 37, they moved it to 38 and moved 37. That type of idea. So I think that was quite sensible, because when you live in an environment, you know, that we do, I think you need to avoid clashes like that when you can, and because it damages the product. Yeah. You know, honestly, I mean, we've got a great product, and I think it's important that you know, image of the product is sustained. Yeah. Although some would say, can you imagine the ultimate of all? It's almost like the Super Bowl. I mean, it's one of those ones. It's not necessarily the greatest technical game, as you're well aware. No. It's certainly one that people from a global perspective like to look in on. It's a River Plate Boca Juniors. It's a Fenerbahce Galatasaray. Yeah. That's the attraction of it. I think the history of these of the Old Firm matches lead people into, as you say, tune in from all over the world when they play each other. But I think the game itself
has definitely went down, a notch.
Yeah.
I refereed in the golden era of Scottish football, in my opinion. We were so lucky, when we had the Larsons and the Gascoignes, and I don't want to mention too many players because I'll miss some out, but that era was fantastic, and the Old Firm games were really, really difficult, to handle, because these people knew what it was all about. I think that's a bit lost now. I think players come and go into Celtic and Rangers 2 seasons and they've gone.
Yeah.
So they don't realise the history of it, where in those days there were, as I said, the Peter Grants and the Ian Fergusons and the Barry Fergusons and so on. They were steeped in it, and I think that makes the game harder. So I think those days are maybe gone now.
Yeah, that's the thing about it, which is great for someone like yourself. And although, as you mentioned, you're in the zone in these games and you've got to focus on officiating, were there players in that period of 15 years where you thought, oh, my God, this guy's on another planet, he's just great to watch?
Oh yeah. And you talk about in Scotland?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, the guys that you're talking about, Brian Laudrup, Henrik Larsson. I mean, when you think of the start that Henrik Larsson had at Easter Road that day, and then even as a person, not just a football player. I mean, I used to watch Larsson up close, draw the ball with the underside of his boot past a goalkeeper and stroke it in a cup final at Hampden and stroke it into the net. It was so natural to him. There weren't many players could do that type of thing. So I think players like Larsson and Laudrup also. Laudrup was, when you were up close to him, you could see what he was doing. Those were 2 players that really stuck out in my mind.
Were they easy to referee, those 2?
They were. Henrik Larsson never ever gave you dissent. He gave you a wry smile, and that actually hurt more than I would have preferred a verbal volley from him, because he used to cut you to the bone. There were other players that played who would cut you to the bone, and it didn't have any effect because they were always like that. But somebody like Larsson just, as if, what are you doing? That had the same effect, as a volley of abuse. But these guys were special, really, really special.
And in contrast to that, you've mentioned the volatile ones. When you were going out onto a park, I mean, Willie Young always jokes about his relationship with Chick Charnley, because I think he sent him off for year after year in every different colour of jersey you could imagine. Were there players that even now, if you met them, you look and you laugh and you think, my God, you gave me a hard time?
Rino Gattuso was a great example, and I remember Rino come up to me in the tunnel at Tynecastle, and the Old Firm in Edinburgh are difficult matches. These are really tough games, especially Tynecastle. Tynecastle, I loved refereeing at Tynecastle, especially under the lights. The crowd were on top of you, and I remember Rino Gattuso in the tunnel said to me, "Hey, Hugh, remember, speak with me. I'm 1 yellow card away from 3-match suspension. You need to talk to me." And he's done the body language. I went, "Okay, Reno, no problem. So I think it was about 7 minutes into the game, he lifted one of the Hearts players into the front row, of the enclosure, and of course it was a red card. So I went across, and he's looking as if to say, "This is him coming to speak to me." Red card, and he went, "I asked you to speak to me." I said, "You need to give me a chance." Poor Hearts players lying their legs, apart. So you did try to talk to players, but if players didn't allow you to speak to them, then obviously you had to deal with them.
Yeah, and did that stand you in good stead because of the calibre of player that you were officiating over? Did that stand you in good stead as you were climbing the ladder in Europe and on the world stage?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's what is disappointing just now with our international referees, is that they have got the experience of refereeing, 2 really, really big clubs, and also, as we say, the clubs in Edinburgh against the Old Firm. They don't get the chance to take that experience abroad, and also the fact that they're not refereeing at the really high level abroad means that they're not getting the experience to bring it back to the domestic game and use their skills that they use abroad, because there's nothing better for a referee who's refereeing with confidence. And if you're refereeing Barcelona against, Sporting Lisbon, and you're coming back on the Saturday to referee Hearts against St Johnstone, you're oozing confidence. You know, that's what that wee bit of arrogance can be mistaken for.
Yeah.
So you're coming back into the game, and that's great. That's great for our game. Where if you're away refereeing, you know, with respect, two teams from lower countries in the Conference League, you're not building up that experience to bring it back to your domestic competition. So it's important that our referees are refereeing, you know, and sitting at the top table in Europe.
Yeah, we talked about players. What was your relationship like with the managers? Was it, you know, was there a fun element to some of them, or a volatile element? Because I've spoken with that many referees. I mean, I think, you know, I mentioned Willie Young. I think he turned around, you know, at one point and said, you know, Aberdeen were playing that bad one day that Eb Skovdal says he was going to make a substitution, and he says, "Who are you taking off?" And he says, "You pick." It didn't really matter. They were all right.
Off anybody. The managers have got a job to do, and they're under huge pressure. You know, I was at Fir Park on Sunday, and I was watching the Hibs manager. You know, and you could see his, you know, the pressure on them. The crowd are turning against them. So you need to take that into consideration also, because the last thing that the manager wants is for you to be trotting across, you know, to the technical area to give him a yellow card or a red card, whatever it is, when the crowd are already on his case. So you need to show a wee bit of compassion. You know, you need to understand their emotions. But the managers, I really didn't have any. Martin O'Neill was a character in the technical area. I remember Martin, I think it was Celtic versus Inverness, Cali, and I mean he really freaked out on he was down on his knees because I gave a throw into Inverness Cali. You know, it was a throw in. And he was, you know, so I waited, because sometimes the way they react, they want you to come to the technical area.
Yeah. Because
it lifts the crowd and they're all against you. And I went, no, I'm not buying that one, Martin. So I waited till half time and I went to see him, and I went, what was that about? You know, I said, keep it for next week. I think the following week was Old Firm game.
Yeah.
And he went, oh, I'm sorry, because he was a lovely guy.
Yeah.
He was a really lovely guy. But as soon as he steps into that technical area, they become different people, you know, because all their work that's been going on for that season or for that week at training, and you come up with a crazy decision that blows the whole, you know, plan out the window. Referees sometimes don't realise that. So you sometimes just need to, you know, Dick Campbell, you know. We were on holiday a couple of years ago, and remember I've stopped refereeing nearly, you know, 15 years, 16 years, and I was on a cruise ship, and the lift doors in this cruise ship opened, and there was Dick Campbell standing at the other side of this door, you know, and I've never had as much abuse hurled at me in this lift. You can see people going, what the... And that was Dick. He was having a winter break away for abroad. He was still at abroad. So they don't forget you.
Yeah.
You know.
15 years on, he's still
15 years on.
Yeah. What was the highs for you? What was the ultimate high? Was there a point where you thought that I've enjoyed this so much, I'll never forget this moment?
I think obviously being on the podium at the World Cup final, you know, was pretty special, because again you pinch yourself. You're there with Germany against Brazil, and we were up getting our medals at the end of the game, and you thought, wow, this is so far for, you know, for refereeing and bridge work. Motherwell was my very first amateur game, and here you're in the World Cup final, and even watching the game for the sideline that night, you were thinking, wow, World Cup final. But it was these events. I refereed in South America, one of the deciding. In South America they have a group of 10 for the World Cup qualifier, unlike Europe, and I was sent by FIFA to referee Uruguay-Brazil in Montevideo, and it was quite a very, very important game. Uruguay were nearly out unless they beat Brazil, so that was an incredible experience. Full stadium full of Uruguayans, and Uruguay beat them 1-0 with a penalty kick, you know, so those type of things stick with you forever.
Yeah. Is the low the obvious one that you and I can remember going to the paper shop and chatting with you, is the SFA point that the lowest point in your career ever?
Yeah, probably. It was because it was you know, somebody, you know, it was a nothing.
Yeah.
Now
I can remember saying to you at the time, because obviously I mean, you don't hide from the fact that you meet people and you get to know them. And I never, ever in my life, ever, in all our experiences together, look and go, oh, Hugh Dallas is either a Rangers fan or a bigot or whatever. And I felt your pain in that whole episode, because I just think, you know, there but for the grace of God, lots of people share stupid, funny, some distasteful emails or whatever. I'm not condoning.
No,
you probably know yourself. No. Do you share it? It's the wrong thing to do. But it must have been a difficult period for your family life as well.
That was the most hurtful thing. It wasn't the fact that I was leaving the SFA. That really didn't trouble me at all, because I'd been there for 4 and a bit years, and you know, it wasn't for me, to be honest. The hurtful thing was the family. You know, that was really, and the family were never taken into consideration by anyone. And that, now you talk about mental health, and you know, that then was horrific, you know, for the family, especially given, you know, how it was done. It was sent from within the SFA. I was on the phone to somebody and I laughed, and they, what are you laughing at? And I thought, it's amazing, who makes these things up?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
I went,
and we've all seen them. You know,
what is it? Send it on to me.
Yeah.
Click.
Yeah.
Once. That was it.
Yeah.
You know, and of course then my email and so on. Anyway, the rest is history. But who I'll never ever be so grateful to was UEFA, because immediately UEFA says, come and work, you know, we want you aboard, and they knew the full story also from me, and I was with them, I'm still with them, you know. It was, and that was great, because that opened up a whole new, you know, a whole new avenue, you know, that opened up world European football in particular, and I could take that experience to the European referees, and I've coached all over Europe, and it's great that you can pass that on to the young referees, and you see a young referee sitting in a classroom on day one, and you think, you'll be a Champions League final referee. Yeah. And they have been, and they've went all the way.
And is that the only regret, or is there, as you look over your career, is there something else that rankles with you?
No, I think the whole, I just felt that at that time, my family never decided for me to get into refereeing, it was me. Yeah. But here they were suffering through it, you know. And as you say, the fact that these fingers were getting pointed, bigots and all that kind of stuff, which that's just no me at all. But you know, it's you need to answer to your, you know, to what you've done. Yeah. And, but no, I don't think I've really got any regrets. I regret never getting the chance to referee the Champions League final, because the year that I thought it should have been my final, it was in Glasgow. But the General Secretary had decided that a local referee would not referee. They've changed it now. Yeah. We changed it when we were part of being the referee officers. We changed that thing because we thought, if that's the right guy at the right time. So I regretted that, because I'd love to have. I did the UEFA Cup final, did the Super Cup final, but the Champions League final would have been icing on the cake for sure.
I've got to pick you up on one point though. If the family's going through a torrid time, why in God's name did you let your son become a referee?
Yeah, I know, and it was funny. I actually tried to talk him out of it. No, for that reason. I didn't think he had the personality, you know, and I knew that as he went on, the name, you know, because it's no Smith, you know, it's a name that's...
Yeah, it's a heavy shoulder, it's a heavy burden, isn't it?
And he did fantastic, you know, he went through and he did, and of course, it would have been more difficult had I been at the SFA, because it would have been, no, daddy this and daddy that. So the fact that I'd left, you know, the SFA then, and he still continued to, you know, weave his way through, and he did a really great job until he got a really bad injury 2 years ago. He's a very successful businessman, so that sort of curtailed his travelling abroad also. But and he's now, you know, one of 2 specialised VARs that the SFA have. So,
are you surprised by his comments in the last, you know, few months, where he said, you know, he feels the pressure? You know, sometimes he just goes home at night and thinks, have I got it right? You know, you've sampled it at the top end of refereeing, but because, you know, what Scotland's like, we're embracing VAR, but we're scrutinising it every game. And he said, you know, you're looking at it and then you're going home at night and it dominates your whole life. Have I got that whole afternoon right, looking at these?
Yeah, I can understand it, because a a little bit of forgiveness for a referee on the pitch when you make a mistake. There's no forgiveness for a VAR when you've got 6 cameras or 12 cameras, and you've got all these replays and different angles and slow motions, and you can't make a mistake. I mean, you look at what happened, this week in the Premier League in England on Monday, where people are looking at that incident and thinking everyone's fine.
Yeah.
They can accept the referee because maybe the referee's not a great angle on it. Has he touched the ball, the goalkeeper, when he came to punch that? Has he not? You're looking at it on all these different cameras, you're thinking,
you've got to see it.
You've got to see it.
Yeah.
And Howard Webb is a very, very strong personality, and Howard will make sure that these things happen less and less.
Yeah. Best game you've ever worked on?
The best game I've ever worked, as far as a game goes, was I refereed AC Milan Barcelona, and it finished 3-3 in the San Siro, and the quality of the football that night was just breathtaking. And I think on the Saturday when I come back, I was refereeing Queen's Park, East Stirling on the Saturday. So that brings you right back down to earth, and I can remember that day because they were renovating Hampden at the time, and there was a Harris fencing where the main stand was, and there was this wee boy on his bike and he's giving me dog's abuse through the Harris fencing, and you balance what you had 3 nights earlier, and that's refereeing. But that game was just was amazing.
Yeah. Best one-liner from somebody on a park to you?
I remember Big Yogi. I probably can't tell you all his one-liners because it's on TV, but I remember he tried to hurt you one day when he says, you're not having a great game, big man. He said, in fact, the crowd are laughing at you. That way.
Pain.
You go, oh no. And you look about and nobody's laughing at you, but he wants to hurt you so much. But there were a lot of one-liners. Gascoigne, and I remember in the League Cup final, Gascoigne and McCoy's were nearly fighting during the game. The final was at Celtic Park.
Was it Hearts?
They
played Hearts, didn't they? Yeah.
And the two of them, I actually had to step in between. The game was going on, and I had to step in between them as I'm running up the pitch, and it was. These are things that you never ever see.
Yeah. Before I touch on, just before we finish, I want to talk about you personally, because it's maybe an insight that people don't get with referees, past and present, is as you look at things now as a referee, when you're listening to what's happening at FIFA and UEFA, do you think that there is a rule that should come into effect that you'd like to see that would improve the game?
I think they're trying. They're trying everywhere to. We've now got VAR is probably the biggest change in refereeing or in football that we'll see. VAR's huge. So now they'll start and tinker. Round about the edges of things. They're looking at timekeeping at the moment.
That's my bugbear.
Yeah, timekeeping is definitely something, because they've in Turkey, for instance, the average amount of time that's been added on in our matches now is roughly about 12 to 16 minutes added time, and it can be even higher than that. Yeah. Because we're calculating goal celebrations, VAR checks, everything.
Will we stop the clocks?
The reason that they're trying to stopping the clocks is they're trying to make referees be more accountable for time. So they're saying, you keep it in control. But that could be the next thing. I would like to see throw-ins being done away with. I'd like to see kick-ins instead of throw-ins. It's the only time in the pitch that a player's allowed to handle the ball. It's not natural. It's draconian, I think, a throw-in. It should be a kick-in. Because what it does right away, it leads to goal-mouth action.
Yeah.
Because, they're kicking it from the halfway line straight into the penalty area. It's like another corner. I think that would add a wee bit more excitement.
If you stop the clocks, though, it would stop time wasting, cheating, you name it, substitutions. All of that would go.
I don't know how the TV companies would sit with that.
Yeah.
Because I take it they've got slots for adverts and programmes that are following on. And,
Absolutely.
That's the only, and I know that they talk to the broadcasters all the time because they're so important. So I think that could cause an issue. I know, for instance, in some countries that when the game stops for an injury, their adverts all of a sudden appear around about the screens, and they're trying to fill spaces as much as they can. But I hope we don't go to the basketball style stopping the clock.
Yeah. You mentioned your fitness. Obviously. Now enjoying the UEFA thing. How long do you think you're going to keep going at that?
I don't think you can go forever, because I think a young, I'll use it domestically as an example. I think people would rather listen to, say, Willie Collum speaking to a young referee than Hugh Dallas, because Hugh Dallas is an old generation now. I've said the same at UEFA, that you go into a classroom now with introductory course, and they know who you are, but but they know better who Bjorn Kuipers is, who just did the Champions League final 2 or 3 years ago. So they want to hear his experiences. So I think you need to know when to stop and when to take a different role up, but no maybe on the front line. But as long as my health, allows me to continue, I'm enjoying it. Enjoy the travel. Got a bit much just at the end of COVID, when we started back again, because you were so used to working from home and it was quite comfortable, and then all of a sudden it's delayed flights in the airport, early mornings, and so that took a bit of getting used to again.
And tell me about that health, because for so many people that are maybe your close friends, you obviously like to keep, with your family, certain things private, but there was a scare.
Yeah, there sure was. Get goosebumps just thinking about it again. That you think you're immortal, that you can go forever. And I came back off holiday about 18 months ago and didn't feel great. And of course that then takes you to the docs and then takes you to testing and stuff. And long story short, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it was like getting hit with a train. You just never ever thought that there were anything wrong. So then for the past 12 months, it's been a fight. It's supported magnificently with the family. Just couldn't get through that kind of thing without family. And of course you then meet other people, and when you're going to hospital and you're at Maggie's, seeing other people's experiences and things like that. But I've been through the surgery. I've come out through the other end, and I've just completed my final blood test, this week. So everything so far has been positive. So hopefully that's the way it's going to continue. But it was through other people being tested for it, especially men. 1 in 8 men, die with it. Black men, 1 in 4. So it's a serious. It's the biggest killer of men, next to women with breast cancer. So, but men think, they want to be tough, and I'm not going for that type of test. And it's a simple test, and then it's a simple blood test just to give you your reading. It then puts you onto a programme where if everything's okay, you'll be called every year for the same test. So it's a simple thing, but I would really plead, with men who are sort of after their 50s to go and get tested.
See that moment when that call came in? Is that the moment where you realise the mortality of human beings? The whole feeling of, was there a fear? Was there what was going through your mind? Of
course there was, and then the fear turned to pain, because you had to then sit, your wife down and tell her, and your sons, and tell them, and then at the same time you wanted to keep it a wee bit private because it's personal, but on the other side of the brain it's telling you need to tell people, because my brother-in-law is similar ages to me, and I'm pestering him to go and get tested, which he's done. So it's a matter of highlighting it, but the blow of hearing the word, the big C word, is really, really terrible. And there's an advert on TV just now where it tells you 1 in 2 people. It's no 1 in 20 people. 1 in 2 people, when you think 1 in 2, and maybe 4 of you sitting in the living room, and you think 2 of us out of the 4. So it's a big blow. So yeah, if there's anything I can do to raise awareness, of prostate cancer, then I'll certainly do it.
And with that journey, and I'm delighted that you know, this has a positive ending, especially and of all days you sitting in this chair. Is there a psychological help that you think helped you along the way, as well as your family? Because people have, guys especially, a fear of doctors, a fear of any kind of test, invasive or whatever. You know, they do have that bravado. Was there a psychological element to it as well for you?
I think if you've got toothache and you go to the dentist, you know what you're going for. You know you're going to get filling, or you know you're going to get pulled out or whatever. With this, you've never went through anything like this, so the journey is the journey. It's unexpected. You don't know what's around the corner. You go for a test after 3 months. You're hoping everything's okay. There are the various options that you can take. I was lucky that I was diagnosed early. And that was all down to the doctor, you know, my own GP that put me on this programme to get tested. So from that point of view, that you're just hoping, and then you need to go for tests for if it's went into the bones, and so you just don't know the next time you go to the hospital what they're going to do next. So for that point of view, it was a wee bit scary, but it's the family. The family are there round about you, and of course, Dr. Google is one of the worst things. Yeah. You go in and you Google things and you read all sorts of stories.
Absolutely, it's the worst thing you can do, isn't it?
I had to stop that, you know, to stop that altogether.
And knowing the boys as I do, is there a wee bit of dark humour in there as well?
Of course there is.
Yeah. Can I have that medal, Dad?
There's absolutely. I used to get into my study and there were things disappearing off the wall. You know, I'd say, where is that? And you go down to maybe Andrews and it would be up on his wall. So it's when's the car due, MOT, Dad? You know? No, there's plenty of dark humour in our family, that's for sure.
And the support of your wife, Jackie, would be absolutely amazing.
Jackie was just amazing, and you know, she sort of confided in one or two our school people, our school friends, and you know, they were supporting her. So because it's not just yourself that's affected, you know, and you're saying about the boys, who supports them? You know, so I had to sort of support them and say, it's fine, guys, everything's good, you know. But,
putting on a wee bit of a brave face though for them.
Of course you do, and you try to continue, you know, the way it is, because I always remember the doctor saying to me, if you're going to get a cancer, this is the one to get, and you've got it early. Yeah. And that stuck in my mind. That was the positivity that I had. It wasn't doom and gloom. And then when I went back after the op, you know, he says, well, it's definitely not going to kill you. Yeah. And I went, because he said that there are more people die with it, you know, as you get older, that people probably don't even know they have it. Yeah. Than, you know, there is that actually, you know, takes you out. Well,
that's the bit of brilliant news. Well, let's finish on let's finish on the. I'm not saying I'm going to get any better news than that, by the way. Let's finish on a couple of things. When I was watching you referee and thought Hugh's the top man here, I automatically knew who I thought was the best referee in the world, which was Kalina, which I don't think I'm doing you a disservice. He was absolutely magnificent.
He was the second best.
Yeah, in your family, I understood you'd taken a poll that day. But as far as now, who's the best referee in the world for you?
I think the guy who just refereed the Champions League and World Cup final, Szymon Marciniak from Poland, is referee. He was a former pro footballer. Refereed in the. He played, I think it was Bundesliga 3-2 or something. So,
would you like to see more of him? That style of a footballer goes to the referee.
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
He stopped very early.
Right. Okay.
I think that's the secret.
Yeah. What makes him the best referee in the world?
I think he knows football, and I think that's important. You know, you'll hear managers and players complaining about he's never played the game. I think you need to have played the game at some level to get some type of understanding, and then you need to learn, you know, as you go along. But he's definitely the one of the best at the moment, you know, for sure. And that's why UEFA gave him the Champions League final this year. You know, there were never any doubt. He had a super World Cup final. You know, if you remember back, you really can't remember much about refereeing in the World Cup final, and that's a good sign. Yeah,
and with that in mind, you've mentioned something that I think sometimes people lose sight of is you're somebody who loves football, just like us all. We love watching it, we love revelling in great moments in games. I'll give you it in a world stage then, who's the best player that you've ever witnessed when you were on a part and you thought, oh, thank you God for letting me see this guy?
Zidane, undoubtedly. Never ever witnessed. He could do things with his feet that I couldn't do with my hands. You know, He was great. He was volatile. He was a bit unpredictable on the pitch. I never had any problems with him. But you'd always to be aware. He was a bit like Paul Gascoigne. Paul was great if he was in the mood.
Yeah.
But if he wasn't in the mood, you had to keep an eye on him because he would do something that, you know, maybe off camera. But Zidane was just, he never spoke English, so you couldn't really communicate with him. But he always come up and shook your hand at the end of the game, or, you know, and I was very lucky to, I think 2 or 3 occasions I got his shirt after the game, whether it was with France or whether it was when he was playing with Juventus, or Madrid. He was just the perfect all-round player. He really was. I never get the chance to referee Ronaldo because I'd stopped before Ronaldo came on scene, or Lionel Messi. But he said, in my day, was the man.
Yeah,
he was the daddy.
And before you leave, it's so subjective, this question, and everybody's got a different answer on it. How would you like to be remembered? Personally,
I'm a family guy. As long as I'm remembered as being a great dad, you know, that's all you can, or a great granddad now. From a football point of view, I just want to be remembered in amongst all those great referee names. You know, you mentioned some of them at the start, you know, guys like Bob Valentine and Brian McGinley and the Hopes and these people. And if my name's mentioned in there, that would do me. You know, yeah. I've never ever claimed to be the best at this or the best at that. But I think if you've refereed at the top level, you can, you know, you can be remembered as one of, you know, the referees that made an impact in Scottish football.
Yeah, I suppose I'm slightly biased. I couldn't think of a better guest as a friend to come on to start the first of these programmes. Hugh Dallas, thanks for joining me.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. Thanks very much.
Top man.
Good to see you. Thank you.